Your fear is the default, which is causing you to operate and make decisions from fear, whereas your logic needs to be the default. What do I mean by this? I'm Kanisha Hart. I am the host of the Coach Up podcast. I also am a speaker, and I talk about how you forge through fear to create the future by design that you want to live. Okay, so let's get into it. I heard Andrew Bustamante, I hope I said his last name correctly. I heard him on Diary of a CEO on that podcast. And he was talking about fear. A small portion of what he talked about was fear. And he talked about the fact that fear and logic are default areas of our brain. They are default sectors of our brain. They are how we think. Fight or flight, right? We hear that all the time. Either we are, when something happens, especially something that is triggering. I really hate that word. Don't even know why I use it because I hear it all the time. What we hear is what we regurgitate, unfortunately, if we hear it enough. So let me try a different word. It is something that when something happens that causes us to react quickly, it causes an immediate reaction. It's not a norm, it takes us out of our norm. Then we typically experience fight or flight. We all know this. In that moment, our brain says, do I stay and fight or do I flee, right? Which is flight. It's the same. That default reaction is operating out of a place of fear, self-preservation, however you want to say it. But there's also the default, from what I understood from Andrew, of our logic, our objective brain, our logos working in place to say, when I think about this rationally, that is me as a human being, that is actually what I typically do. But unfortunately, most of us, definitely myself included, our default decision making comes out of whichever one of those we experience first. What does that mean? So again, if I understood Andrew correctly, we experience the fear of something first, and we make decisions out of that because it takes much longer for our logic to catch up for this to then be able to make the decision out of it. We're not willing to wait that long. And by default, our mindset is not to wait that long. So let's just think about if you're in an argument with somebody, if you're having a conversation with somebody and you are not at all happy about what's going on in the conversation, you're actually angry. You are angry in the conversation. This person and you have been going back and forth, and you've said things and they've said things that have just moved you to a place of anger. And so they then say something that just for you crosses the line, and you haul off and hit them. Right? We talked about fighting earlier in another video, but you haul off and hit them. You are responding to a fear in the fact that you don't want to continue to be hurt. So you are going to inflict hurt first. Okay. However, you did that because in that moment, your emotions were high, which triggered your body chemicals to be in a different state than they normally are when you're calm. And then your mind understands all of this is going on. And so it reacts. And you've not yet trained yourself enough to, in a situation like that, not react, but instead to observe and then react later. So you hit them. You're in an argument, you hit them. You haul off, you hit them. That was an in the moment decision created by fear, fight, flight, whichever one you want to assign to it. If you had walked away when that person said whatever it was that was the tipping point for you, if you had walked away, thought over the conversation for 48 hours, and then come back to that person, you would have come back with a rational, calm, probably a little more objective, if not completely, a little more objective, hopefully, answer and response to their statement and to the argument as a whole. Why? Because both the fear and the logic are defaults of our human makeup. But it just takes us longer to tap into the logic than it does the fear. And because we're not willing to wait the 20 minutes, the 2 hours, the 2 days, the 2 weeks to allow the logic to process in a situation, and we don't even think about allowing it to process. Because we don't wait on that, and we make a decision, take action out of the immediate emotion that we have, that we're dealing with, which is fear. That is why we make poor choices at times, or choices that do not lead us well. So how do we fix that? One way to eradicate fear is to learn to wait and not make decisions out of the fear, and wait to make decisions out of the logic when it starts to kick in, which often means you have to remove yourself from the situation that is causing you fear, or detach yourself mentally, emotionally from the situation that's causing you fear, to then intentionally think about it logically and rationally and objectively. And that's hard to do. So then the question is, okay, Kanisha, you teach people how to forge through fear. How do you do it? Again, I'm just telling you what I heard Andrew Bustamante say on Diary of a CEO. If I got this wrong, Andrew, and to the host, I am so sorry. But this is what I understood. So you indoctrinate yourself to small fears and making decisions from a logical standpoint in the face of those small fears. So, like, let's do an example. I just gave you an example about you're having a fight, you're having an argument, you get upset, you've been getting upset, they say something, you haul off and hit them. Okay. That is a bit of a bigger situation. That's not what I'm talking about doing. What I am talking about doing is taking a smaller fear that you know you have, that then you can sit through it until you get to the logical thought process around it to then take action. So, all right, let's say you have a fear of spiders. And it's not even poisonous spiders. Like, cautiousness around poisonous spiders makes sense, 100%. But let's say you have a fear of spiders. So when you see a spider right now, you run the other way. If you're in the house, you go get somebody else to kill it, right? You don't even want to see them. Like, you're afraid that they're going to spin their web and then, like Superman, attach it to the ceiling and fly onto you, who's completely clear across the other side of the room, and they're not even concerned about you. But you're afraid that that's what they're going to do. And then they're going to bite you, or they're going to crawl under your shirt, and then they're going to be living on you. You have this fear. Not making fun of individuals who have a fear of spiders, but I am saying this may be what you think may happen, which is elevating your fear if you see a spider. So the spiders being interested in you, they're not really, most of them. And the fear, again, is a feeling, not necessarily reality. Being aware of spiders, yes, we're all aware that they're there, but being a fear of them is something that has been internalized for you. So in an exercise to learn how to make decisions from logic versus fear, you'll take this fear and you'll tackle it, and you'll say, this is what you'll do. I'm going to go to the zoo. May not be a great place. They have pretty big spiders, but I'm going to go somewhere where they have spiders. And I'm just going to stand there and I'm going to look at them. Or maybe you decide in your mind, the next time you see a spider, you're just going to stand there for 5 seconds, for 10 seconds. You're not going to do anything. You're not going to call anybody. You're not going to try to kill it. You're just going to stand there in the same space as the spider. It would be better if you're able to do this intentionally, not encounter the situation and then try to go through this exercise. I'm looking up because a bee just flew in my house, but we're going to act like it's a spider and leave it alone. I'm sure it'll leave me alone. So you're going to intentionally go somewhere to find a spider so that you can attempt to control your exposure to the situation, right? And preferably if the spiders are in an enclosed container, you don't even have to worry about trying to get somebody to kill them. But by taking the action of intentionally going to a place where there are spiders and then spending time there, 10 minutes, 5 minutes, 2 minutes, and not reacting as you normally would react, not running away, not going to get somebody to kill it, not trying to kill it yourself, not getting your shoe and trying to bang on it, none of that. You are now indoctrinating yourself to not make decisions out of fear. And you are now incorporating the logic of your mind to say how you're going to deal with this fear, deal with this spider, right? Because we're trying to get rid of the fear. So the logical part of you, while you're standing there, choosing not to run away, is saying, the spider is not even looking at me. The spider is not interested in me. The spider is not poisonous. This spider is not attempting to come and land on me. The spider is not charging the window of its container trying to get to me. The spider is uninterested in me, and the spider is not a danger to me. That's the logic that you are employing while you are facing this fear head on that you have. And then you have to do that over and over and over and over and over and over and over again. You have to put yourself in the situation where you have a fear. And each time you're going in with the logic and you are executing with the logic of, I'm not going to react how I normally react because there's nothing to fear. And then your brain starts to begin to adapt to the fact that this stimulus, the spider, does not equate to fear, and it doesn't equate to me making decisions in that fear. Even if you're still a little bit of afraid, or even if you're still a lot afraid, you're going to choose, you're doing this action allows you to make decisions from the logic and the logical portion of your brain than from the feelings. So you may go to see the spider and stand there and just be trembling and afraid. But because you've been intentional about, I'm going to face this fear, I'm going to put myself in the situation where I normally feel fear. And now I'm going to focus on making decisions from my rational mind, not out of fear. That is teaching and training your brain to operate from a logical standpoint instead of a fear-based standpoint, to make decisions from a logical-based standpoint versus a fear-based standpoint. It's also training your brain to get to the logic more quickly in a situation where you feel fear than it previously would before. All super powerful keys to learning how to forge through fear, to learning how to, in most areas of your life, eradicate fear. And it's by choosing to do two things: face the fear and not make a decision from the fear, and to make a decision from a logical, objective standpoint, even as you are experiencing in the throes of, in the midst of your fear or whatever causes it. So I want that to sink in. I want that to resonate. I want you to think about that, because I think Andrew Bustamante was exceptionally on point when he talked about this. I mean, he was a CIA spy, so he knows a little something about fear and about decision-making, right? Intellectual community. So I want you to resonate on that. I want you to think about that. And I want you to think about how you can apply that today. For me, I was on LinkedIn today and responding to individuals on LinkedIn that I had gotten messages from. But then when I got done, I knew that I needed to prospect for guests for my Coach Up podcast, for the Coach Up podcast. And I just didn't want to. And I had to, okay, why do I not want to? There's a couple of reasons, but I'll give you one. One, because I'm afraid I won't get enough people to have to keep the podcast going without me having to do solo episodes because I don't have enough guests right now to fill the slots. But that making the decision to not continue or to not even do the prospecting because I'm afraid I won't have enough guests doesn't make sense. Hence, fear is illogical. Because if I choose not to do the prospecting, then I definitely won't have any guests to interview and to share with you on the Coach Up podcast. So while in that moment, I did not have time, like I got done doing what I was doing and I had set a timer and so that time was up. So I have to do that activity a little later, even though that the whole time thing is crazy. You need to work by results. It's a whole nother conversation. I have to realize that what I need to do instead of saying, I don't want to do this because mine is, I just don't want to. No, there's a fear that is fueling that. Instead, what I have to do is what I'm talking to you about. I have to say, okay, I don't want to do this. But if I don't do this, what I just talked about, I will continue to not have the number of interviews and guests that I need in order to continue to share my podcast. So from a logical standpoint, I am going to reach out to 5 people right now, regardless. That's how you make the decision to say, that's how you make the turn from making a decision in fear to making it out of logic. And it just takes a little longer to get there, but it takes practice and intention. Sometimes you can do it quickly, but with your fears that you've been operating in for a while, myself included, it's going to take practice to stop the decision-making that's happening out of fear and to say, let me wait it out as my mind processes what's fact here. We talked about fact earlier in another video, fact versus fiction, fact versus fear. Let me think about what's fact here. And now based out of that fact, let me make a decision. The fact is, I intend to continue to produce the Coach Up podcast. The fact is, because I'm already producing that, the fact is I interview guests. The fact is, in order for me to interview guests, to continue the Coach Up podcast, I have to have guests to interview. Therefore, my decision based on those facts is prospect now versus fear. Oh, I don't feel like it. I don't want to. I'm afraid I won't be able to get enough people. So I'm just going to not do anything right now, but I'll do it later. Procrastination is also fueled by fear. So you see how this works. So again, I say all this to say, I want you to think about what is your response and when do you get to something that causes fear for you? And then when do you get to the logical part? Like when do you look back and say, how long between the decision you make in fear versus your reflection does it take you to say, oh, I should have done this? Man, I should have made that decision. Is it a couple of minutes? Is it a couple of hours? Is it a couple of days? One of my old rules, and I don't know that I've been adhering to this lately, may account for some life situations right now. But one of my old rules that I lived by was I take 48 hours to make any big decisions. And big doesn't even have to be like, I'm buying a house. No, big is somebody asked me to do something that wasn't on my radar. I need to take 48 hours. Because for me, I learned years ago, if I make the decision in the moment when I'm asked or when the opportunity is presented or the situation is presented, I often make a decision that I'm not comfortable with, or I don't like, or I have regret, buyer's remorse. But I did find that after 48 hours, the Lord was kind enough to just bring the answer to me. One that was comfortable, one that was good for me, one that made sense. May or may not have been good for me, depending on a whole number of factors. But I thought in the moment, it was the right way to go. So you have to know. So what is yours? And they're different for different situations, right? So what is your time frame? Pick one fear, the fear that you've been working on since we started these videos. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, go check out the previous videos. What is the fear that you've been working on? And I want you to think about when you make a decision out of fear concerning around that fear, how long is it later typically that you then say, man, I should have done that differently? Just monitor yourself, see. And now you have the insight, thank you again, Andrew Bustamante, about how you can start to change that. Okay. This is how we forge through fear, ladies and gentlemen. And this is how we get better to design the future that we want to live and that we want to be a reality. So, forge through fear. Put into action the things that we're talking about, and we will get to create and design the future that we want to be reality. Let's go.